Hey guys, it's fantastic to be chatting with Ian Cox today, all about his journey from Croydon to the World Cup and the stops along the way. I've had the pleasure of working with Coxie at Gillingham Football Club and then at Whitstable Town Football Club. Coxie, how's it going?
Yeah, Nick, it's all good, thanks. Yeah, it's not too bad at all. So can't complain.
Good. All right. So, like I mentioned, we're going to be talking about Croydon to the World Cup. Memories, Coxie. I want to take you down memory lane in this chat today. And I've got a couple of photos that, listen, I said it to you earlier, you don't look a day different in some of these photos. So, whatever you're putting on that face first thing in the morning, you need to be marketing that up and selling that in bottles.
Well, thank you for that, Nick. But I have to say, like, I wish I felt that way. But yeah, you know what? I feel quite gracious that I've kind of aged quite well, really. But when I do look back at these pictures, it does actually make me feel a little bit old, I've got to say, because it seems a long time ago since I was actually like with the Bournemouth strip there. So it seems an eternity since I was there playing at the Dean Court, so it was called back then.
All right. Well, let's get started. And what I wanted to start with was talking about the game today, where there's so much focus on pro academies and highlighting young talent. Recently, we saw a young boy advertised on Sky Sports, 7 years old, on Sky Sports at Liverpool, and that focus being on that youth so much, and really being a part of that academy setting. But that wasn't how that journey started for you, was it? So I just wanted to know, where did you spend your junior days playing football?
To be honest with you, Nick, you know what? I just spent the most of my time just playing football over the school. So where I used to live in Coulsdon, which is just outside Croydon, I spent most of my time playing football. Once I got home from school, I just used to go out the back and play football in the school. There was a big school field there. We used to climb over the fence, and we just used to have big games, like sort of our estate versus the estate over the other side of the field. Just all used to congregate together, and it was more of a like sort of 15 versus 15 on a small pitch. So I come from a religious background. My mum was very religious, so a lot of my friends were playing football on Sundays. I think one of the teams that was that was very prevalent back then was a team called Palace Guard and Selsdon Juniors. Those were the two teams really that were doing it back then. And a lot of the guys I knew were playing for those teams. We used to have one quite close to me called Coulsdon Colt, but again, I never really had the opportunity to play, football regularly on a Sunday for a structured team because I wasn't allowed to play on Sunday. So really, my journey started just playing football over the schoolyard and just playing for the school team.
Wow. Did you ever feel like you missed out not playing any team sports at that age?
Yeah, to be honest with you, Nick, I did at the time, because I think all I wanted to do was just play football, and when you see your friends playing football and they're allowed to go out on a Sunday and play in the garages, and because we weren't allowed to play on Sunday, we just literally Sunday was the day for the good one above, and we would go to church on Sundays and come back and weren't really allowed to go out and play football. So yeah, I did feel I missed out a little bit. Just purely because they were playing in a structured team week in week out, and I was getting that experience. Although at a young age you don't necessarily look at it as being experienced because you just want to play football. So yeah, I felt I did miss out in the early stages, but I guess when I look back and I look at a lot of those players that were playing a lot of football at an early age, I think they burnt out quite early. So they picked up a lot of injuries, um, didn't necessarily go on and do anything, and their focus kind of um, subsided really from playing football because they had too much football at an early age. So in that respect, I suppose it worked as an advantage for me really.
Yeah, okay. So how do you think those 15v15 on small pitches prepared you for your pro career?
At the time, I wouldn't have looked at it as being something that prepared me. It was just something that we didn't have nothing else really to do. So it was just a case of that was what we did. We didn't have, I think now, like a lot of the young people, they've got, video games, they've got all the singing, all dancing, like Xboxes and the PlayStations and things like that. So we never really had that, like sort of indoors, so we was always just out and about. But in terms of playing, against like 15v15 or 20v20 on small pitches, I think one way how I felt it prepared me is because I was always playing up against older players, and they were more physical, and some of them were better than me. For me, it was just a case of just trying to better myself really, and just play the game, just play as much football as I possibly can in the time that was allocated to us when we was allowed to go out.
Fantastic. So I want to move on to the start of your professional career at Crystal Palace, and really the reason I highlight this is because I'm not sure if you've seen it, but Crystal Palace's new academy facility
Yeah.
and the level of facility that they're offering to their youth players now is massive.
Mm-hmm.
So how did those first few moments feel at Palace?
It was, I suppose it was a bit of a baptism of fire for me when I first went into Palace. I mean, I think I signed for Palace just before my 23rd birthday, so wasn't particularly young when I signed. I went there on trial when I was 17, and I played just on the Saturdays, like in the youth league. But I didn't have any opportunities to. Well, again, I didn't have the opportunity to sign for Palace as a muscle for their academy. For me, I enjoyed the route I went down because it just gave me a bit more experience away from football. I think so much focus is for these youngsters nowadays is the be all and end all, where there's so many different opportunities out there with regards to kind of develop a career in football, whether it be as a professional footballer or sports scientist, coach, physio. There's so many different avenues out there. But for me, making this journey, starting off my journey, I started off, as I said, I started off really late, just before my 23rd birthday. Um, and it was coming from Carshalton, where it was non-league, and I didn't, just to like sort of think about it, I didn't actually want to leave Carshalton. And I was thinking about this just the other day, just purely because the culture that we had at Carshalton was really, it was just such a nurturing environment. And the manager there was probably the first positive male role model that I had in my life at that time. So I didn't particularly want to leave because I felt he developed me so much as an individual, as a footballer, as a person, as a man growing up, that I didn't actually want to leave when the opportunity come about. But yeah, when you talk about the academy back then, it's there's no comparisons to what it was like back then to how it is now. The facilities that they've got now is just on a different level in comparison to what we had back then. And I think it was a Mitcham training ground. I think it was where we were, and that was very basic, believe me.
So going into Crystal Palace and maybe feeling a bit nervous, I think is fair to say, obviously
Yeah.
going from that nurturing environment. Were there any players you looked up to and anyone who helped you?
Yeah, there was a lot of players. I mean, obviously you had Gareth Southgate, who was there, who I think was a fantastic role model for anyone. And I think Gareth is the same age as me, but he was, when I was playing, when I used to go on trial, Gareth was the captain of the youth team, and he obviously made the progression and went on and become like so obviously captain of Crystal Palace as well. And he was very level-headed, very grounded. Wasn't judgmental at all, so he would help you. He helped me like sort of going like sort of making that transition from non-league to the professional game. So Gareth was a help. There was a lot of players around my age, Bobby Bowery, there was George Endar. At the time when I signed, we had the first £1 million teenager, Bruce Dyer. Um, he was there, so he was all quite close. So yeah, for me, like sort of, I think one of the kind of big influences was Gareth, really, because I think Gareth is just so grounded and non-judgmental, especially seeing someone like myself coming into to Crystal Palace. Um, he accepted us and welcomed us with open arms.
No, that sounds great, and definitely you can see that happening now with the England team. How welcoming and opening he makes that environment. So, moving on from Palace, you made over 400 appearances for your next three clubs. So, Bournemouth, Burnley, and the Gills. How did your career develop and your role within the team evolve over those 400 appearances?
Well, I think when I first started off at Crystal Palace, I think I was speaking to, I had a talker probably about a month ago, and I was talking about my journey from, non-league to full-time, being a full-time professional. And I think my journey, like, so when I started off at Crystal Palace, that was a bit of education for me, really. That was like the start of, something which I really wanted to do from a young age. I don't think I made the best of the opportunities at Crystal Palace, just purely because I felt like I could have, if I was given more opportunities, then I felt I could have, done a little bit more. But equally, when I did have the opportunities, and I'll always revert back to a game that my debut when I played QPR, and it was on Boxing Day. I think it was 1995, 1994. And that was the season we got promoted into the Premier League. And I remember John Salako. This is my first game. We weren't doing too well in the league. I got drafted in to play a game. And I remember, like, John Salako, we had a free kick. Literally the first few minutes of the game, John Salako's literally whipped a ball in, and it's just me and the keeper. And I've headed it, and it's gone just over the bar. And I always remember looking back at that opportunity as a big opportunity, because if I had taken that opportunity then, things could have been a little bit different at Crystal Palace for me. That could have been the start, lots of me making my name, and then lots of going on to do, lots of hopefully do better things. But it wasn't to be. Then this was a time when we used to play a game on Boxing Day, and we played the next day as well. So the next day we played Tottenham, and I was on the bench, and I didn't get another opportunity to play at Crystal Palace in the first team until March. So it's like almost like 3 months later. But just going on, like, sort of from that, like, so when I left Crystal Palace, it was time for me to move on and go down to. I was fortunate enough that Mel Machin was at Bournemouth, and he showed a bit of interest in me. So I took the opportunity to come to Bournemouth just purely because I just wanted to play football. And I wasn't playing any games at Crystal Palace, and like, there was a change of management as well. I think Dave Bassett had just come in. So for me, it was a case of lots of just going out and just getting some games under my belt. My 4 years at Bournemouth were, I think for me, were pivotal, really. I think I had another mentor in Mel Machin, who become someone who I really respected as not just as a manager, but as a person, as an individual, someone who is very honest, and tell you how it was. If you was doing well, he would be the first one to praise you. If your standards dropped below the standards you set, he would also be the first one to kind of like let you know that, like, sort of, you're not performing the way I should be. So 4 years at Bournemouth were unbelievable. I was fortunate enough to be bestowed with the captaincy, and that was a real honour. Because someone of my nature, and you would know, Nick, I'm not really one for big words and things like that. Getting the captaincy was a real honour. It was a real honour to be able to lead the team out week in, week out, and also lead them out at Wembley as well. So at the 4 years at Bournemouth was education for me, because it just, I had someone who believed in me, and that kind of spurred me on, and gave me confidence to, believe I could achieve, some good things in the game. I left Bournemouth and went to Burnley, and my 3.5 years at Burnley were, very good as well. Like, so the back end of it wasn't so good, just purely down to injuries. But the 3.5 years at Burnley, we got promotion in the first season, literally a few months after I left Bournemouth. But I knew I had to step my game up going to Burnley, because whereas like at Bournemouth we had younger players, who were not as experienced, going to Burnley, there was a lot of experienced players there. Players that have played at the top level, the likes of Mitchell Thomas, Steve Davis, who played at lots of big clubs and have played consistently, like sort of at the top level. So for me, I knew I had to raise my game. I felt I was getting a bit stale coming to my my little time at the end of the 4 years at Bournemouth. But at the time, my time at Bournemouth, at Burnley, really was another good 3.5 years. As I said, we managed to get promotion, get to quarterfinal of FA Cup. Played in the quarterfinal of the Coca-Cola Cup. So it was good, and we missed out on the playoffs to the Premier League. The first year in the Championship, I think we missed out by maybe, I think it was 1 point. And in the next season, so we bettered our points tally and missed out by 1 goal. So yeah. So then lots of my tenure at Burnley come to an end, and this is down to the ITV digital crash. I think the money was coming out of football at the time, and a lot of clubs were cutting the cloth. I was one of the players that got released by Burnley, and at the time I could have gone to Preston, but I took a punt and came to Gillingham instead. And I spent five fantastic years at Gillingham. There was trials and tribulations along the way, and I'll probably say that my 5 years at Gillingham wasn't as we weren't challenging for honours like I was when I was at Burnley, which is a little bit disappointing. But equally, so I had some fantastic times at Gillingham. Again, bestowed with the captaincy and being able to lead the team out, week in, week out.
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing you play at Priestfield, being a young man, sat in the stand, stood in the stand, and it was always a pleasure watching you play. And I had to get this image. I had to get this image of you wearing this shirt because that's the one I remember. So yeah, you were great at the Gills, and as you were everywhere else. So I want to move on then, as you've spoken there about getting the captaincy and becoming that figure that leads the team out. And one young man you had in your team at Bournemouth was Rio Ferdinand. How was Rio, one of England's best ever players? How was he to have in the team at such a young age?
It was brilliant, Nick. He was fantastic. He literally, from the first training session, he come down. So you could see he was, ahead of everyone else. Just his decision making, just his attitude towards training, the way how he applied himself. He was head and shoulders above everyone. And things he would do in training, like we would be kind of just standing there in awe. So he was a pleasure to play with because I learned, and I've said it on numerous occasions, I learned a lot from Rio just playing alongside him, and he was only 18 years old. So yeah, he was fantastic. He was fantastic for Bournemouth. I think he only played 10 or 11 games, but I think those 10 or 11 games that he played in, I definitely learned a lot. And it only enhanced my game because I took little bits from what Rio was doing and tried to then implement it into my game. So yeah, it was good. He was, as I say, he was head and shoulders above everyone else. You could see it. He was just a class act. He's just a class act, and he went on to prove he was. I think when he got recalled back, he went straight back into the West Ham team. And I remember actually going back up to London to watch him play. I think West Ham played Crystal Palace, so I went to Palace to watch him, and he actually played in midfield that day, and he still was, he still was fantastic when he played in midfield. So yeah, there's not enough superlatives to say about Rio at that time. I'm just glad I had the opportunity to have spent, to have played with Rio, albeit very brief. Didn't want him to go because I felt we could have, achieved some things together at Bournemouth. But yeah, he had to go back. Him coming down to Bournemouth was just a bit of a, just to gain some experience and getting ready for the rigors that lied ahead.
Yeah, and he was so complimentary of you. In an Ask Rio Twitter Q&A, he mentioned you and how, I mean, I've got it here on the screen, still doesn't know how you never got the opportunity to play at a higher level, and he looked after you. So we've got you to thank for the England centre back that we see for the decade and a half after that. So, but carrying on that journey was on to the 2006 World Cup with Trinidad and Tobago. How was that? How was playing as part of a World Cup?
That, Nick, that probably remains. I know a lot of people have asked me what's the highlight. This would have to be the highlight, I think, because I was coming to the end of my career. So I think I was probably about 35, 36 at the time. Never ever envisaged that I'd be going to a World Cup. But if I go back like probably 2004 when the qualifiers started, or they were just about to start, we went to Tobago and we played some games in Tobago. Some friends played Northern Ireland and a few other teams, and the boys went on from there to play in qualifiers, the early qualifying rounds. But what I kind of realised is that normally how the actual World Cup qualifiers work is that you'll have 3 teams from CONCACAF that would normally qualify. But for some reason, it was 3 teams plus a qualifying team. The 4th place team will go into a kind of a playoff against, the best placed team, the best losers in the best 4th place team in, I think it was Asia at the time. And that happened to be Bahrain. So at the time, I was thinking, if we can't qualify, for the World Cup, given that there's 4 spots to qualify, we'll never ever have a better opportunity to. And this was in 2004. But yes, we went on, managed to qualify for the World Cup. But prior to that, the journey wasn't easy because, up until Leo Ben Harker come into play, we were struggling. You had the likes of Mexico, USA, Costa Rica, who were the 3 big teams in our group that would naturally take the top 3 spots. And then you had that 4th place team, which was all to play for. So we was very lucky. Leo Ben Harker, like to organise us, gave us structure, discipline, he gave us the focus in order to know that we could do this. We could do this. And one of the messages I would always say, and I'd say to any young person, is that dreams can come true, because this was a dream come true for us. Not just for myself, but for everyone affiliated with Trinidad and Tobago. At the time we was the smallest nation to qualify for Trinidad and Tobago. I think just over 1.5 million maybe. And it was a fantastic achievement. But as I said, it wasn't an easy ride getting there. But for me, yeah, at 35, 36, going to play in a World Cup, yeah, it was an unbelievable experience. But it was tinged with a little bit of a disappointment that I didn't actually get any game time. But that far, the whole experience of the World Cup far, outweighed the disappointment that I experienced at not getting any game time.
I guess being a part of the squad is a big thing in those tournaments, and knowing the man that you are, you would have played an integral part in training and been a big figure in the change room as well for some of those younger players. But what did you learn? What did you take away from that experience?
It's like we said, like I just said, Nick. I think for me, the biggest thing for me is that dreams can come true. Because if you go back, so the World Cup was in 2006, started in June. If you go back probably about 9 months, we were so far off it. Go back a year, say, we were so far away from actually qualifying. It was just, no one would have ever believed or given us a hope in hell to try and qualify for that World Cup. I don't think we had that many points after about 4 or 5 games. But as I said, so we picked up some momentum when Leo Ben Harker come in, and I think probably his first game we ended up losing. But after that, we picked up some momentum and we ended up, qualifying. But my biggest message is that dreams can come true, and it doesn't come without hard work, doesn't come without endeavour and sacrifices. From my own personal point of view, I wish I had the opportunity to play some game time in the World Cup, but I do believe part of that was down to myself, really, because I wasn't committed to the whole journey, all the way through. Whereas, obviously the other players were committed and they kind of played their part and so forth. So yeah, my message would be that dreams can come true if you believe and if you work hard enough, dedication, and just, again, there's a cliche about us all trusting the process, but we had to trust the process because it was Leo Ben Harker's dream that we would end up going to the World Cup. But it was also, we was harbouring the hopes of 1.5 million people who will never ever, experience this whole experience again.
And one of the players who would have been a big figure in that camp and a big figure for the people of Trinidad and Tobago was Dwight Yorke. How
Yeah,
was it playing with Dwight Yorke?
it was brilliant. I've got to say, Nick, like for me, as a young man growing up, I remember seeing. I think it was, yeah, I think it was 1989. I think it probably was when Trinidad missed out on the World Cup. Like so when they lost to the USA, and I remember watching it on TV. So I think I was about to leave to go to a game at Whiteleaf at the time, and it's come up on the TV. About Trinidad and Tobago's journey, and they're one game away from qualifying from the World Cup, and it would be like sort of the biggest thing in Trinidadian history. But they lost. Trinidad and Tobago lost 1-0, and Dwight, and there's another player that was in the World Cup squad, so Russell Latipi, who were part of that squad that ended up having to endure the heartache of not actually going to the World Cup. And I think Dwight said a few times that he never thought he would actually get that opportunity to get so close to get to a World Cup. But yeah, playing alongside, and training alongside the likes of Dwight, and Shaka Hislop, who were top players, played at the top level. Again, was unbelievable. I remember being in my front room on numerous occasions watching Dwight play, in the Champions League final, and I used to love the way he played. Him and Andy Cole used to enjoy it so much. So yeah, it was a fantastic experience, and it was a joy to play lots of with the likes of Dwight and Shaka and Russell as well.
Fantastic. So now you're back at Bournemouth as a part
Mhm.
of the community department at Bournemouth, and obviously doing some fantastic work. We've been keeping up and hearing in on everything you're doing. So I wanted to give an opportunity for people to be able to follow you and your journey and all the great work you are doing with the Bournemouth community. But one last question I have is what advice would you have for any young players who are dreaming of playing professional football?
I think my biggest advice would be that, as I said before, it's about working hard. It's about, lots of being dedicated. It's about, not just on the pitch, but off the pitch, how you carry yourself. But I think the biggest advice for me is not to, and I know this might sound a bit cliche as well, but not to put all your eggs in one basket and have a backup plan as well. Because I think a lot of players nowadays have set their hearts on becoming professional footballers, and the heartache that they receive at the end of it when they don't get offered a scholarship or they don't get offered a professional contract is very stark. And we see, think about a year ago, a young player at Man City who took his own life when he didn't end up getting a professional contract. So, and I think that there needs to be more work done about the education, to young people that, it's not the be all and end all. They still can forge a career out of football, but also, like all knowing that it's very, very difficult. The percentage of young players that make it from even academy level that go on to actually make the pro game, when you think there's only 92 football league clubs, is very small. So my message would be like, so follow your dreams and work hard and be dedicated. There'll be sacrifices along the way, and also like, so don't take lots of things too personally. And by that I mean that I think that a lot of young players tend to get despondent when things don't go their way. It's about having a balance, try to be balanced. And when you're young, you don't necessarily have those core skills at hand, but it's only as you start getting older you start to understand. But yeah, I reinforce, work hard, be dedicated, lots of just make sure that you have a backup plan in place as well. Don't solely set your soul on just to be a professional footballer. You can play at the lower league levels as well, make a good career, at the lower league levels. And that's what like a lot of people I know do that and have done. They didn't want to go into the professional game because they never knew how long they were going to be in the professional game. They had carved out a career for themselves, and they also had muscle their football that they could go and play as well.
Fantastic. Coxie, I just want to say thank you very much for taking the time to answer my questions. You can catch Coxie here on Twitter at ENGCox00 or with the ASCBC community. Let me go for that one again. ACFB community. Cox is doing great work and is definitely someone you guys want to keep up with. Coxie, thanks for your time.
No problem, Nick. Thank you for inviting me on here, my friend.